So your connection is
today, and to see Antonia and to partner with our colleagues from Education International yet again to support the transformation of the teaching profession that we want to see coming out of our efforts. Let me just begin by welcoming you all to this consultation on the revision of the UNESCO 1974 recommendation concerning education for international understanding, cooperation, and peace, and education relating to human rights and fundamental freedoms. As I said, this is organized by Education International, UNESCO, and the International Task Force on Teachers for Education 2030, which, as some of you may know, the TTF, that's the acronym we use for the Teacher Task Force, is a global network of more than 150 countries, organizations working together to advocate for teachers and the teaching profession. As you know, some of our work has to do with the creation, the dissemination of knowledge to identify some of the gaps concerning teaching and teachers, but also to advocate together with many partners like Education International and others for the social standing, the recognition, the appreciation, and the translation of this appreciation into better conditions for the professionalization of teachers, but also for the support that teachers need in order to fulfill and to fully deploy their talent in education. So we believe that is an important part that education must accomplish, and I think the start of it has to do with acknowledging the knowledge that teachers produce, to listening to the voices that teachers can have in terms of how, for example, in this particular case, we review a recommendation that we deem fundamental for education. It has to do with international understanding and cooperation. It has to do with peace, with human rights, non-violence, and many other issues that are important today. So without any further ado, I just wanted to welcome you to this session for the revision of the recommendation from the perspectives, from the eyes of teachers. I will give now the floor to my colleague Antonia Wolf from Education International. And you know, she's a research policy and advocacy director at EI, to give a general introduction of the panel. Please, Antonia, if you may.
Thanks so much, Carlos, and a warm welcome from EI as well today. EI, as you know, is the Global Federation of Teacher Unions representing teachers at all levels of education, and it's our great pleasure to co-host this consultation together with UNESCO and the Teacher Task Force. So we're looking at the recommendation that was agreed in 1974. It is obvious to all of us that the world has changed dramatically since 1974. Part of this is actually that some of what's covered in the recommendation is actually quite an integrated part of what we today would describe as a quality education. And I think that's important to recognize. There's been movement, but there is, of course, a lot of reason for concern. And much has been said about the power of education to transform both individuals, the societies we live in. And much has been said about the possible misuse of education and the ways in which education systems continue to promote outdated gender stereotypes, for instance, the ways in which many of our systems promote stereotypes of all different kinds, an extractivist approach to our planet. So there are fundamental struggles that are taking place, speaking on behalf of our members, that we know are taking place across the globe. And there's still a lot that has to change. and particularly in relation to teacher preparation, teacher support, the ways in which we can stand with and better prepare teachers for taking these struggles in their classrooms. So the question today is really about teachers. It's about the teacher perspectives, the teacher expertise related to the kind of guidance that the recommendation should provide governments, member states with in terms of what kind of support and preparation teachers need, what kind of policies and programs our education systems need in order to ensure that all students enjoy a quality education and actually get all that they need to be able to go out there and transform the world, promoting and fighting for peace, social justice, climate justice, human rights, the dignity of all. So we have the perfect audience for that here at today's consultation, and we are so looking forward to hearing from you all. Thanks so much. Back to you, Carlos.
Thank you very much, Antonia, and thank you for to all of the Education International colleagues to have joined this consultation. Antonia has already anticipated some of the importance of hearing your voices. She has highlighted issues around gender inequality, about different forms of discrimination, about social justice, and I think that the recommendation is very much about that. It's about promoting awareness and understanding, but it is about a vision of the world that we want, and it is about the vision of the education that we need to get to that world that we want. So, in a nutshell, it is the political dimension of education that is at stake. Therefore, the importance of this session. And my colleague Lydia Rupert, who is UNESCO Program Specialist at the section for Global Citizenship and Peace Education, will give us an overview of the 1974 recommendation and the revision process as in preparation for our inputs to the different parts of the recommendation. So Lydia, please, if you can.
Sorry, thank you very much, Carlos. There's a lot of content, so I've tried to pack it into the 10 minutes. And if I have any questions, but please don't hesitate after to raise them. So if maybe you can pull up the PowerPoint, if that's possible. Thank you. Maybe start with the next slides, please. Thank you. So what is the 1974 recommendation? So the recommendation is actually what we consider at UNESCO a landmark legal instrument in the field of education, because it brings actually for the first time in a standalone document, peace, international understanding, human rights, and fundamental freedoms into the field of education. Given the social and political context of its elaboration in the 70s, it is also a remarkably bold and modern document and visionary in many ways. It offers an interdisciplinary perspective that remains very unique among UNESCO's normative instruments in education. And it's also for this reason that it is recognized today as a key tool for promoting the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and reporting on SDG 4 and Target 4.7 in particular, which, as you know, focuses on global citizenship education and education for sustainable development and cultural diversity, as well as Target 12.8 on access to and awareness of information and sustainable development, and Target 13.3 on climate change education. Next slide, please. So what are we hoping to achieve through this the revision process? Well, first of all, it's good to underline that this revision process that we're embarking on was actually requested by member states at the last session of UNESCO General Conference. Given the current challenges that have emerged in the current century, but especially since the 70s. I think this slide needs to be changed. or at least on my end, it doesn't seem to change. Now, to ensure that it remains relevant to address the new and very real threats to global peace and human survival, this instrument requires some reinforcements and some updating. And these are challenges, as we know very well, such as climate change and pandemics and the spread of violent and hateful ideologies and their links to conspiracy theories and persistent inequalities and discrimination, racism, xenophobia. But also, as we know that, and you know firsthand as educators, that the field of education has remarkably changed since the 70s. We understand the challenges much better today in terms of what works, what are the triggers of behavior change, and the triggers of violence, and the role of education in that process. And also the international institutional educational landscape has a legal landscape has changed. We have a body of legal instruments and norms that are much stronger today in the field of education. For example, we have the Declaration on Education for Human Rights and Training adopted in 2011, which gives very clear guidance on what we mean by education for and through human rights. Again, I feel that on my end, the PowerPoint isn't changing, but I hope that's fine on your end. I'll just continue going through. So in short, what we hope to achieve is to ensure that though the instrument remains relevant, that we have a much stronger relevant instrument that is even more relevant and effective in our current context to address those lingering but also contemporary challenges. We hope to, through the process, because it is very much a participatory and consultative process with member states, that we strengthen their resolve to take action, to implement the recommendation, inspired by the what we know from the 2030 agenda. And in that sense, also, this means harnessing all the positive shifts that have taken place in education and in different disciplines to accelerate progress and implementation. Slide 4 on maybe the process. I think you have to move back now, if I understand the slide, where you are on the slides. To maybe, I would like to explain in detail, what does that concretely mean? How does one revise this recommendation? So this recommendation as a legal instrument is bound to, the revision process is bound by our rules and regulations. So there are very clear stipulations on that. However, to get from A to B, given that the process started in a very preliminary phases late 2021 and is expected to end in 2023, there are 3 steps to go from A to B, from the current recommendation to a revised and refreshed instrument. The first phase is what we've called the preparatory phase, and that was involved a lot of internal consultations, the reviewing of evidence, of reports and documents, collecting data, identifying gaps, and assessing advancements in the field. The second phase is the phase where we are right now, is what we call the technical consultation phase. And that started in February 2022, and that will end in June 2022. Now, this technical consultation is the moment where we are trying to consult as wide and broad as possible, consulting professionals in the field of education, but beyond, from other disciplines that are intensely engaged, in social transformation processes, learning processes, educational processes within and without of formal education institutions, contributing to peace, international understanding, human rights, and fundamental freedoms. And we have done this through different ways. We've conducted a global survey where we've collected views for about 1,500 respondents from 130 countries around the world. We've conducted regional technical consultations in every region. And we are also now conducting a series of what we call thematic technical consultations, where we're bringing people from different regions of the world, disciplines, fields, professional horizons as well, but on a specific topic. So we've had a thematic technical consultation, for example, with youth. We've had one we'll be having one shortly on monitoring and evaluation. We had one education for sustainable development, and now with you on the issues of teachers. Now, all these inputs will feed into the deliberations of an international expert group that has been established by the Director General of UNESCO to advise the organization on the revision of the text. Once this expert group has finished deliberations and proposed initial changes to the instrument, the document, this revised text, will be shared with member states in September 2022. After translated in all languages, and officially sent to member states for formal comments, written comments and observation on the text. These comments will allow us to prepare a second draft that will then be shared again to member states at an intergovernmental meeting where delegations from countries will then negotiate the text and shape it and arrive hopefully at a consensus on a document so it can be adopted at the November 23 session of UNESCO's General Conference. So that's the process, how we get from A to B. And I guess to be able also to introduce your conversation and to get some of the inspirations going, I've been asked to say a few words about the document as it looks today. And so what is the instrument that we are trying to improve? So specifically about the scope of the instrument. As I mentioned, it is one of 8 UNESCO recommendations in the field of education, and it is quite special within the suite of recommendations because it really truly captures the spirit of the organization and its constitution, which, as many know, state that that peace should be built in the minds of men and women, and therefore the 1974 aims to really infuse the values and the principles of our Constitution, but also the Charter of the United Nations and the Declaration of Human Rights into education. So it has a very broad scope. It is expected to cover ECCE, right, to higher education, technical vocational education, education for out-of-school youth as well. However, at the time, it wasn't formulated in very systematic terms, but it is definitely has that broad lifelong learning expectation, though not specifically not named as such. It is also referring to arts and culture and how they contribute to learning and can be harnessed to achieve learning objectives. So it's quite interdisciplinary and innovative because it early on talked about new technologies. Of course, at the time we were talking about television and how television could contribute to improving learning outcomes, but it had that intuition of seeing how tools and opportunities in technology could enhance learning. Next slide, please. Now, the structure of the instrument, it is composed of currently of 10 sections. So it's quite long. Reading it, one feels quite inspired, but if looking at it quite closely, we realize that it is filled with guidance and recommendations that cut across all fields of education, but that are disjointed and may have some gaps. Sections 1 to 3 outlines the scope and the general principles that should guide education policies. And then from section 4 right to the end, you actually have the core, the body of the technical guidance. Next slide, please. The guiding principles. Now, the guiding principles are formulated in Article 4. So if you have a screen, I invite you to go straight to Article 4 of the instrument to look at what are the guiding principles seen as objectives of educational policies, should they aim to promote peace and human rights education, peace and human rights. They are here listed on the PowerPoint. Many of these principles, as Antonia mentioned, are at the heart of what we consider today as good quality education. They're definitely built into SDG 4, Target 4.7. And in this sense, they're still very valid today. However, there is a sense that they could be enhanced by adding a few notions that are critical to understanding peace in our contemporary time. And this would be, of course, the notion of sustainability that is so central to human survival on our planet. Ideas of gender equality that have been elaborated since the 70s, thanks to the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, notions that have also inscribed in the Convention on the Rights of the Child. One could also see very easily how we can be more systematic about our understanding of how these issues are relevant throughout life. So having a true lifelong learning and life-wide learning perspective. strengthening the human rights-based approach to education, which is now more clearly understood thanks to instruments adopted, as mentioned earlier, since the 70s. And also probably including a more nuanced understanding of the global-local nexus, given our current context and our globalized world, the role that culture can play in improving the quality of education and supporting peace and international understanding seems critical at this juncture. Next slide, please. And here I would just like to end with a few words again about the technical guidance that you have seen. As mentioned, it's very visionary, inspiring in many ways, but it also has gaps. Though it mentions self-education was the term at the time, and student participation, these are very sort of discrete notions that could probably be brought more central into the document. There are also gaps in terms of no mention of curriculum, of assessment. There is nothing either referring to learning environments or the school climate. And the notion of school community is very vaguely addressed, speaking more about the roles of parents, but not of other actors and non-state actors in general that are playing critical roles in the delivery of education. And of course, the major blind spot is the risk and opportunities offered by digital tools, which obviously in the 70s was not an issue, but I think we all agree would need to be brought into the instrument to strengthen its relevance. So I think I've been reminded of that I've come to an end, but I think I've said all that I need to say. And if there are any questions, I'm here to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lydia. My colleagues have stopped the video. If you can allow it, please. There we go. Thank you very much. Good. Thank you very much, Lydia, for that presentation. I think it sets the scene of the different themes, of the different areas that are up for consultation, including the curriculum, including teacher education and training. So now we will move precisely into the heart of the discussion for today's consultation. From the areas that you saw, of course, the thematic one for this consultation is on teachers, but it has three main areas. One of them is to include the new thematic areas that should be included, for example, on teacher perspectives. The second one is around teacher preparation. And the third is about the support received by teachers on the challenges they face, taking into consideration the purpose, the topics, the elements of the 1974 consultation. So now it is your turn to take the floor, but we invite you to do so in short interventions, possibly keeping them to 2 minutes per person so that we can have as many as possible. But to take us through the first part of our discussion, I am very pleased to welcome Cecilia Barbieri. She's the Chief of Section for Global Citizenship and Peace Education, who will actually walk us through it. So Cecilia, please.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you very much. And hi to everyone. Can you hear me well?
We can indeed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So, well, we can now jump immediately into the first session out of these three, let's say, where we're going to focus on specific topics. And as Carlos mentioned, this first one, these first 20 minutes that we have will be for us to explore from your perspective, actually, what are the most pressing challenges that pertain to this recommendation that you think education can and should respond to. We heard from the introduction from Carlos, from Antonia, from Lydia, that, you know, historically, the world in the 70s was different from the world of today. Challenges at the time have not entirely disappeared, but now we have many more. And that's also, of course, one of the rationale for the revision of the recommendation. So we would like actually to hear from you what you think from your perspective, from your region. We have colleagues coming from all regions of the world. What you think should be included as key areas when it comes to the challenges. I would invite our colleague to put a slide on the screen where we have a couple of questions that we are invited to respond to. Yael, I don't know if you can see the slide. I think it's coming up. Yes, so we have actually two key questions. One is, as I mentioned, what are the most pressing challenges, societal challenges that we think education should respond to? And the second is what also are the opportunities that education can offer that should be reflected in the recommendation. We heard, for example, the issue of digital learning, which is something that, of course, is becoming much more predominant in these times. When we talk about the response of education, of course, we look at education from the perspective of lifelong learning. As Lydia mentioned, right now in the recommendation, there is already mention of non-formal education. However, again, the concept has also evolved. So we think that we should consider that perspective. So what are opportunities that we see? And I think also from your experience, we can have very interesting inputs. Now, we have 20 minutes to have this conversation. You may want to raise your hands for the ones who would like to have a brief inputs and intervention, couple of minutes, as Carlos mentioned. You can also put some comments in the chat. And we are going to have a link to a Jamboard in the chat that I also invite you to open. And you can also put your ideas on the board, and we are going to see how it will look like. So I think we can start. I will also open the board, and I can see already Carrie, who would like to take the floor. Carrie?
Yes. Yes.
Please.
Yes. Can you? Okay. Now I'm on the screen now. Hi everyone. Thank you to give me the floor. I reviewed all the documents about these recommendations and also about the consultation report. I found there is a link. A perspective that unions can take. That is the currently we're working on. It's about the pension fund reform. Why we're talking about this is because that the birth rate is decreasing in many countries. And now the young teachers and the youth, their burdens are heavier than ever before. And that creates some dissatisfactions, and which links to the hatred among these communities, because it is a design. The design is to we support that the seniors teachers can contribute more and to leave the fund bigger for the next generation, and that is the value of support to support the intergenerational gap, which we call the social justice across generations. So we think that the just and fair design of the taxation as well as the pension fund is the way we think we can contribute to these recommendations, which I didn't find in the report. And if we could feed this kind of needs of the youth, of the young teachers, that would be a good way to bring them back to the union, to bring them back to the international cooperation, and to contribute more to the ESG energy CED education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carrie, for your very relevant points. So that has, of course, to do with also the overall welfare, right, and of teachers, and also the appreciation, actually, of the role of teacher, which is very key. I can see Sean Robinson with the hands up.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's Sean Robinson from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And I just want to thank the Task Force on Teachers and UNESCO for having these great discussions. Looking through the 1974 recommendation, I think it's a really good instrument that has some wonderful pieces to it that I'd hate for you to lose. You know, the emphasis on developing tolerance, understanding, even the word friendship is in there. And I think that's beautiful. The focus on social responsibility is in there, inadmissibility of war, and the study of cultures. The thing that, from my perspective, is needed is a focus, or moving from a focus of learning about to learning with, learning alongside, bringing in that idea of global collaboration. So to answer the question about pressing societal challenges, is that we have an increase in globalization, and yet we have this decrease in a depth of connection throughout the world. We're looking at tribalism, exploitation, and hatred, and seeing the possibility to be able to use this instrument to say, hey, we're going to work alongside each other, develop the collaboration that is so possible with the current technologies. This is what I'd like to see in the document moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Sean. And actually, it make me think of the one of the regional consultation where this issue was exactly raised, and I'm recalling it was the Asia Pacific colleagues that we have been talking a lot in the last 2 years, also because of COVID, of this idea of being interconnected, right? But it can be very superficial the way we use that, because what does it really mean, actually being interconnected? And I think you really touch upon that very nicely. I can see Stuart.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Thank you for having me. I'm from Scotland, retired teacher, but also Vice President of Scottish Secondary Teachers Association. Interestingly, when we look at the pressing challenges from 1974, many of them have been addressed to some degree. Some still remain very, very pressing, like climate change. Before it was like the environment. We've seen a change over the last 50 odd years. How that's been taught in the classroom has been varied within Scotland, and I'm speaking from a Scottish perspective, and the tools that teachers have been given in order to deal with that. However, when we're looking at the opportunities afforded by education, very few of the subjects are actually specialised enough to give them the tools that they need to be able to take it forward into society. And again, from a Scottish perspective, my background is philosophy and religion. I have taught that subject and lectured on that subject for nearly 50 years. And I find it interesting that within the school environment in Scotland, RMPS or RME, the teaching of religious education, in 1974, a document was also released about the same time as the one that we're discussing this afternoon. And that was called the Miller Report, which was a complete review of religious education. That changed from religious instruction, which was specific to Christianity, and changed radically to cover all aspects of beliefs, of nature, of society, our interrelationships with other people, and it deals with tasks like climate change, the peace, the conflict, immigration, all of these issues that we're looking at today. The irony is that the subject itself is being squeezed in Scotland because it's religion. However, the skills that they are offered in the subject opens up the opportunity to give them the true ability to have serious critical thinking, to be able to analyze and to use their higher order thinking skills. And that's something that we should pursue much more in this document. And I think it needs to be highlighted that we need to give more opportunity to our students to be able to critically analyse all of the issues and to be able to do that in an environment which is safe and secure for them to do so. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Stuart. Can I now give the floor to Alejandra?
Sí, buenos días, ¿qué tal?
Good morning. How are you, Cecilia, and all of the participants? I am Alejandra from Buenos Aires, Argentina. First of all, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to thank the International Task Force on Teachers for Education 2030, active member, and I'd like to share with you a few points that we were working on with the rest of the group. To us, there are 5 important points which, beyond the school we may be in anywhere in the world, and with different realities, they can be private, government-owned, urban or rural, with very rich diversity. And we had many points in common to work on, and they related to what we were saying, us colleagues and co-workers. These 5 points that we have to work on in schools, we have to go beyond the mere notion of where we are in the world. And I mean how we make students aware of the importance of caring for the environment, how we protect and build emotionally intelligent schools where the work climate favors the whole educational community. What kind of projects may we implement in order that joint work becomes visible? Because we all notice that there are very positive points in this. There are also weaker points to be improved, and how to include ICTs. In some places we do have the necessary resources, and other places not so much. And we all know that this is a fundamental tool that wasn't there before, and now it is an essential need. And this was very much stressed during the pandemic. Those that had access and those that did not have access, this became very visible. So how can we work in order that this can be ensured? I mean, access to ICTs and inclusive work based on human rights. And this should be present in all schools around the world, no matter what our reality is. Thank you very much, Alejandro. What you mentioned in the beginning is a very important point, because the recommendation is not just oriented to government-led education. There are several other actors. So the idea is to work with all actors in education. So the recommendation is going to be meant for any kind of school or educational institution. Yes, because there are very different realities in this very rich group. So we want something that takes all of them into account. Thank you very much, Alejandra. I now have Nelba Tucumán. Yes, Tucumán. Hi, I am from Tucumán, Argentina, Nelma Contreras, and just like Alejandra, I also am part of the TTF, the Global Citizenship and Peace and Education, the International Task Force on Teachers and Education 2030. I'm very happy to be at this conference and to be able to make a contribution. We've been discussing in our group, so I'd like to add to what Alejandra has said. One of the recommendations is capacity building based on sustainable development, and also to strengthen and to listen to teachers, practitioners, what they need, what they feel. For instance, regarding working conditions, equipment, use of new technologies. This was exacerbated during the pandemic. And in order to reach these goals, we should work with different entities like official agencies, teacher associations, and practitioners at large. So this is the input I'd like to give you to our discussion. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you very much, Noba. I believe there are no one else requesting the floor.
Perhaps that has raised his or her hands? No. So I think perhaps we can come to the close of this first session. I was actually checking. I can see some comments in the chat that will all be taken into consideration. And I can see also in the Jamboard, there is quite a lot of activity going on. There is mentioning of issues of looking at specific needs of teachers in crisis settings and refugee settings. Of course, very critical, and the need to consult teachers in all areas. And exactly, I think we are in absolute agreement with that. Issues of incorporating equity, diversity, and inclusion in STEM at all levels, and professional developments, issue of decline in democracy, and probably, yes, lack of trust now in public institution. I think it's something that we have seen and experienced in the last years in particular, and it's a very important point. So I think more or less these comments are in line with some of the other comments I've seen in the chat. So I think I would like to thank all of you for this first round, and I would like to give back the floor to Carlos. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. Muchísimas gracias a todas y todos los participantes.
Thank you very much to all participants. I would like now to start with the second aspect that we need to discuss with you, for which we want to consult you about your vision, which is teacher training. We would like to reflect about the role of teacher education, continuing professional development, including the role of technology, old and new, in order to better equip teachers with the skills needed to teach in a just, sustainable, healthy, and peaceful society. As in the previous section, on-screen questions will guide the discussion. These questions were circulated to participants in the concept note that you received beforehand. You can make your interventions on the chat, as has been the case, or in the Jamboard, which is online, and you have to go to the specific page that talks about this dimension on teacher training, so that you can put in your comments. Also, you may raise your hand and speak out loud and answer this question that we have on screen, which regards teacher preparation. How can teacher education and professional development, including the role of technology, better equip teachers with the skills needed to teach in a just, sustainable, healthy and peaceful society? With this question, we can also check on the type of professional development opportunities that can be fostered, how technology can help in continuing education, how can we improve these skills and specific knowledge in terms of content and educational skills in order to teach in a more just and peaceful society. And lastly, the role of technology to improve the learning process. So this is the sort of more general ideas that we would like to consult you on. So if you'd like to raise your hand, you may do so, or you may use both the chat box and the Jamboard. We would like to listen to your first reactions as to how we can improve teacher training in order to include these topics which are part of the 1974 Declaration, education for justice, tolerance, non-discrimination, and so on. Alejandro, you are requesting the floor, and I would also like to see other hands raised, and you may speak in any of the languages we have interpretation for. So please do raise your hand so that we may hear your opinion on these questions. So Alejandra first. Yes, Carlos, I agree that it would be nice to listen to other voices and see other hands raised. It is enthusiasm that pushes me forward, but I agree with you. Thank you very much. Just very briefly, in my humble opinion, it seems to me that we would have to start by examining how the teaching profession is structured in different parts of the world, because as Cecilia said in the beginning, there are core issues that have come up in these last few years or times when contents and the development of the teaching career was structured around the world. This was some time ago, and conditions were very different from what they're like now. So what we notice now is that often we do not have the tools in order to face up to the realities in schools right now. There are many other points, but I can stop here and listen to other places. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Alejandra, for your participation. Let us also read the comments that are being made on the chat. Thank you very much, Dennis and other colleagues. We will proceed to reading them in a moment, and you can also write on the Jamboard, leave your opinions there. So the teaching profession is important, teaching career. We've taken note of this, and we give the floor to Alejandro. Thank you very much. Greetings from Mexico. I'm trying to switch my camera on, but I'm unable to. It seems that it's been not allowed by host. We are from Mexico. We are part of the National Trade Union Workers, Education Workers. Greetings. Oh, greetings now with my camera on. And the topic is extremely interesting, especially when we talk about teacher training from the very beginning. I think that it is very important that we may revise the plans and programs, all of the curricula of all teacher training schools, so that there is actual content that teachers to be can made able to understand what is our role as educators. We are not there just to provide knowledge. Being an educator is going much further beyond, dealing with human relations, providing empathy towards our schools and to our students and in our schools, and both trainers and teachers of teachers to be have to have very clear awareness of how they can motivate teachers to be and convey to them this vocation and this need to go much further beyond. We as an organization believe that we in our institution have to care not just for the right of our workers, but to go way beyond here in Mexico, to involve all actors in education. And we have to be united in order to have a single vision and understand this. We have to provide education to children especially when we talk about climate change, where we have to set the examples, we adults, when we talk about the values that have been sort of lost in schools, that we can talk about the respect that there should be amongst peers, and also when we consider technology, all students should have access to technology, because if we learned anything from this pandemic, and we learned a lot, in remote education, 80 or 90% was based on technology, but we also realized the need for teachers, for this teacher-student relationship. And I think that we have to understand this very clearly so that we can make a contribution. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alejandro, for your participation. I've written down here your comments about revising teacher training curricula. And Alejandro was also talking about climate change, environmental sustainability, and the importance of the social effective dimension of education that we noticed during the pandemic. And in the chat, we also read Dennis, our colleague from Education International, talking about training, teacher training, also approaching the topic of gender violence, which is one of the problems we face in our society. Thank you, Alejandro and Dennis, for your comments. I am now going to give the floor to Stuart Hunter. You have the floor.
Good afternoon again. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you well.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Yes, go ahead, Stuart. Go ahead.
Thank you. It's interesting when looking at the teacher preparations in this section. At the very heart of any implementation of any policy from any government at any level, and up to with UNESCO, etc., at the heart of it is the teacher in the classroom and the children that they are teaching. So therefore, that becomes so key and so important. When we look at the training of the teachers, we can have a climate that's not unique to Scotland, where we have a shortage of teachers. Why? Partly because they're coming into the job with insufficient training, where they are then expected to learn on the job, and we find them losing faith in the profession and leaving within 2 to 5 years. We don't retain them. We're finding our older colleagues who are leaving the profession early because of workload. At the heart of all of this, we need proper training. That training has to be of a certain standard. It's not enough just to have a degree in a subject. It is not enough just to have some basic skills in pedagogical theories. They actually need the ability to be able, in their universities, their training campuses, to be able to actually go through the practical realities of delivering the materials that we're looking at, so that when they come into a classroom, they're better prepared to deal with that. Training has to be set at a minimum standard. That is absolutely essential. I would go further to suggest that 1 year training in a PGCE, for example, which we have in the United Kingdom, is insufficient to actually give them the grounding that they need to go into the profession. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. I think this issue is an important one, and when we talk about the minimum standards for the teaching profession, we often make reference to the competences, to the skills, but we do not necessarily reflect on the values that teachers actually have and actually transmit in their classes. In many professional standards for teachers. They call it la déontologie in French, the axiological dimension of teaching, which is sometimes embedded in codes of conduct, but that speak of the values that we want to be framed in as teachers, but also the values that we want to transmit. And I think this is an important point for this consultation, the values that teachers, that schools actually embed in education, and that can be the basis for it. Thank you very much, Stuart. Let me give the floor now to Sean. Please, I will beg of you to have very brief interventions so we can hear as many people as possible. Please, Sean.
I will be very brief. It's Sean Robinson from Canada again. And I just want to say that teacher training, I find, is still very siloed. You're learning about classroom management, you're learning about your content area, but you don't see a lot of collaboration between teacher training organizations. And you see this kind of collaboration is happening in K-12 more than it's happening in our teacher training organizations. So we need our teachers, as they're being trained, to participate in global collaboration, a forum, even something like this, where they're having to connect with other educators around the world. And they need to be trained in connections-based learning so they can bring that back to their classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Sean. Let's move now to Ojigoga. Please, you may take the floor. You might be muted. Or it might be me. I do see her. I do see his mic moving now. Can you hear us, Ojigoga? I don't think he can. While we get a hold of him again, maybe just to also acknowledge some of the comments that we have had in the chat, and thank you very much for that. I think there is one issue that we have that has been raised, and it's important, that the teaching profession sometimes can be seen as an isolated experience, and Andy Hodgkinson has mentioned that, and it is important. The Futures of Education report that was published by UNESCO last year also highlighted the issue of teaching as a relational profession. So the issue of education being relational, we said before, of the affective dimension, of the social dimension, the collective and collaborative dimension, is something that also teaches in and about human rights. So good to bear in mind. Let me see if we are, if Ojigoga can hear us now, or actually we can hear him. I'm afraid we cannot. So let me move very quickly to Raimundo. Briefly, Raimundo, te escuchamos.
You have the floor. We are listening, Raimundo.
Desde México, nos da muchísimo gusto estar en un espacio de diálogo de esta trascendencia. Creo que hay algunos puntos que, en mi opinión, debemos de fortalecer o de considerar. Entre ellos viene a ser la parte del desarrollo socioemocional, tanto de los alumnos como los docentes. La pandemia nos ha dejado grandes lecciones y entre ellas hay familias fracturadas, hay familias que quedaron huérfanas. Me parece bien relevante de que la voz de los maestros, así como la voz de los alumnos, nos deben permitir que la política pública que impulse cada país tiene que ir apegado a una realidad o a una nueva realidad. Por otro lado, coincido plenamente en cuanto a que la capacitación y la formación de los docentes tiene que ser una columna vertebral para saber a qué le estamos apostando en el mundo. Lamentablemente lo hemos visto, hacia un lado apuntan los gobiernos y hacia otro lado apuntan los sistemas educativos. Creo que es un momento de que tenemos que generar una gran conciliación. El tercer punto, creo que la revalorización de los maestros tiene que ser una parte fundamental igualmente, no únicamente en la parte laboral y la parte salarial, sino que el reconocimiento a la trascendencia de su función docente. Si queremos que la educación se convierta en la gran transformadora, la política pública de los países tiene que apuntalarla de una manera diferente a como se está haciendo el día de hoy. Y considero que hoy más que nunca se requiere un gran acuerdo, un pacto social entre todos los actores que participan. No nada más la educación es la que logra transformar, porque a veces, por un lado, educamos en las escuelas, pero por otro lado, la realidad nos dice lo contrario. La violencia en México, estamos viviendo una violencia tremenda en contra de las mujeres, ponemos un ejemplo, y entonces requerimos un gran acuerdo y un pacto social de todos los actores. Es cuanto, gracias a nombre de mi sindicato.
Muchas gracias, Raimundo. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The issue of socio-emotional learning has also been brought in by Sonia in the chat, so we are really grateful for that. For those who were not able to follow, Raimundo also mentioned the importance of bringing in the social, the emotional dimension of learning into the preparation for teacher education as well. Thank you very much, Raimundo. And I see Astrid Thomasen. If you want to come in, Astrid, very good to see you in this consultation.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I think you can hear me now, right? Yes.
We can indeed.
So under this topic, you are also asking about the comments on section 4, right? On the on how the recommendation can be strengthened under section 4. And from our side, it's could be strengthened regarding the language on social dialogue and tripartitism. So that's a comments from UN, Union of Education Norway. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Astrid, for participating, and greetings to the colleagues in Norway of Education International. I think I'm very happy to see you again. So just to say, we note down as well the issue of social dialogue as one that is very important, tripartite dialogue, and the participation of teachers in not only the working conditions, but also, as has been mentioned before, what are some of the issues that should guide teacher professional development. We've heard of its fragmentation. We've heard of the teaching profession sometimes being done in isolation. We've heard of the relationality that is important to bring in as a vehicle to embed the issues around education for peace, education for international understanding, for human rights, and so on. I also like to acknowledge we're running a little bit out of time, and I would like to thank you for your comments. The comments we have heard about the importance of professional development being free and accessible. I think that is an important point that needs to be made. The issue of the access that there is and the opportunities for teachers to participate in this. It's not only the free provision, but it's also the space and the time, and making the time and facilitating the resources for this to happen. We're running rather late, but we're going to give the floor to one last hand I can see up, is that of Antonieta Garcia Lascurain. I'm going to ask my colleagues to hear if we have translation in English still.
Can you hear me? Is the interpreting working?
Yes, I think I can hear the English now. I think it's working.
I'm not sure what happened before. My apologies. I don't know what happened.
In that case, Antonieta, you might not be Antonieta in the video, but adelante por 2 minutos.
Okay, so you have 2 minutes. Go ahead. Well, thank you very much. I'm talking on behalf of the Teachers Union in Mexico. Now, when it comes to training, teacher training, the first proposal is something that is linked to social dialogue, but that I would link to. Sorry, Emilio, we lost you there. Yes, it's linked to the constant practices that we can put in place when it comes to training. That is to say, regulating the practices of teachers. The proposal would be from day one to make sure that pupils, or rather students that are in teacher training, are really making sure that we are harmonizing the practices. We also need to instill in teachers a culture of peace, constant development, and something that we've seen in recent years is use of technology. If we can call upon these new technologies, that will of course be very useful. But of course, in this context of a pandemic, we see even more clearly the need for these tools and the fact that teachers need to be able to master them. So we also believe that there should be social dialogue so that in all of our countries there can be a kind of dialogue with teachers who are in training across the world. I'm sorry, Emiliano, but could you please wrap up in 30 seconds because we're running out of time? Well, yes. I just wanted to say that every day we are living in a more globalized world. And this really means that we have to make sure that we can use new technology more and more. Thank you. Thank you, Emiliano. And thank you to all of those who have participated in this session. It's really been very short. And I would have liked to be able to speak about all of this a lot more. However, now we're going to move on to a new area of consultation. And Antonia is now going to take the floor again. Antonia, you have the floor.
Thanks so much, Carlos. And colleagues, we are going to shift our focus to issues around working conditions and teacher motivation. So what I really would like to hear from you are thoughts on what the support structures are that we need to have in place for teachers to feel supported in not just teaching and learning in general, but really teaching for peace, for social justice, for climate justice. I'm going to be pretty strict with the 2 minutes because time is limited here today. And I'm going to encourage you to share your thoughts in the chat, on the Jamboard, and I'm also going to sneak in a little encouragement to the women on this consultation to not hesitate to ask for the floor. So, looking for hands to pop up on my screen and looking forward to hearing from you all. And for the Jamboard, you will need to go to the 3rd page to be in the right section. And we're going to start with hearing from Martin. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think time is probably a big issue for a lot of teachers around the world, which makes it hard sometimes to take a step back and to really reflect on practices because we're so caught up in the day-to-day functioning of the school and to make sure that you see all the students and to just the day-to-day routines, which sometimes makes it hard, I guess, to really focus on like other things that are very important, like to teach for like justice, talk about the environmental issues. So I think time is probably something that is like an issue, I think, for many teachers.
Great point. Thanks, Martin. And we are moving to Carrie. Carrie, do you hear us? You have the floor.
Yes. Hi, Antonia. To
Hey
see
there.
you. Hi there. Good to see you.
You too.
I'm glad that you point about the female perspectives because during the pandemic, you know, the most of the female teachers constitute at all levels of educations. About 75% in Taiwan, the teachers are female, are mothers, sisters, and they have to dealing with the technology and the online, offline teaching, also consultation with the students and parents. And after that, they have to deal with their domestic work. And that is a heavy, really heavy work load for the female teachers, especially, it's very difficult to balance the offline rights that we need really for us. So I'm glad you point out that, and I hope that we could see that point added in the recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Carrie, for bringing that to the conversation as well. And we're going to try to hear from Oigoga once again, hoping that his microphone works now. Can you hear us, Oigoga?
Hello?
Hey, now I think we can hear you. Can you speak closer to the microphone?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me well?
Very, very faintly. I don't know if you can speak up.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me well now?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, sorry, I have some technical issues at my end here. My name is Oigoga Onu. I'm an educator here in North Central Nigeria, and I'm happy to be here. Well, I want to speak on the support system by government. I think the government of a particular state can leverage on the potentials of teacher trainees, okay, through the curriculum. That is to say, the curriculum should be very flexible, such that teacher trainees posted to a particular school could be like research scouts for the teacher training institutions to see how successful the school is at implementing the curricula, and if there are any immediate changes that should be done to bring about positive change as regards the current status quo, that is in terms of peace, justice, and sustainability issues. And then the teacher training institutions now can now feed the policymakers, okay, with information as regard the kind of measures they need to implement in whatever district in that state. So I think this kind of support system can really empower schools and school teachers in implementing curricula, which are living curricula that students can benefit from and live a just, peaceful, and sustainable society. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Oigoga, and I'm very happy that we managed to hear from you in the end. And we're going to move to Jamaica and Nadine.
Morning, Antonia. Morning, everyone. Good to be here. Speaking for the Caribbean, I think I can do that. Most of what you experience in one island, you'll find it in other territories as well. I am finding that we have similar issues to what everyone else is experiencing in terms of connectivity, the kinds of devices you have. How could we be better supported? We're seeing where governments are offering internet connection, but it's not necessarily at the level that we would want to have it. We are also seeing some devices coming to teachers to support the online learning space. What we're not seeing as much though is how best to use those devices, one, and there is also the security challenge that we need to talk about, because we are having our students access the internet pretty much unchecked. My experience, which has been a good one in my own school, tells me that there has to be quite a bit that we need to do in that regard, in terms of training teachers how best to merge what we do best in the face-to-face space. It's a tactile, it's an emotional profession that we're in, where you connect with people in order to do a good job. In addition to that, like I said before, do the students just have unchecked access to the internet, being able to see sites and so on that they really should not be seeing? Then at the teacher training level, because I was having a little bit of difficulty with my device before, at the teacher training level, we need to do a lot more with our teachers at the pre-service level, for them to understand exactly what a blended classroom looks like now, and what does blended really mean. some of us try to have students at home and students at school. How does that work? So we need to know what that good class is going to look like in that space. So I think I'll allow someone else to speak.
That's great. Thanks, Nadine. And I think that's something interesting for us to consider around devices and how that enables a lot, but how it might also be making certain subjects, certain areas of education harder. And some would argue that it's easier to just transmit knowledge through a device than it is to start a conversation around attitudes and values and so on.
Not, if I may just use an example, the computational subjects are taking a beating, and guidance and counseling, we are doing quite well, but not as well as we would like. So that's something that we really have to pay careful attention to.
Thanks so much. And we're going to move to Andy then.
Hi. I think for me, in terms of support, there's a golden thread around listening to and amplifying the voices of all the different stakeholders in the mix, the teachers, the pupils, the leaders, because I think unless you do that, you're never going to get resources, curriculums, pedagogy that really kind of reflect local and global issues and to make a kind of community really inclusive. So I think something around voices, which I know is big in the UN Charter anyway, I'd love to see that come out more.
That's great. Thanks, Andy. And you're mentioning school leaders as well. I saw that was a comment in the chat around school leaders and the necessity to look at support for school leaders as well. And then we're going to move to Aris.
Thank you. Maybe I'm turned off my camera. Some have problem with my camera sometimes. I think the support is about the environment, not only in only about the government or in the school, but also the environment, especially like in school, maybe they can increase their budget or training and research. This the important thing to make the condition in their school in their community is growing. And don't forget about the pattern. I meet many of my friend teachers who are innovative but not support by the condition like this, because if they have innovation, maybe some of the other teachers use it without the permission. So the condition is the media and also teaching how they innovative teaching is not growing. They maybe give up after this condition. So I mean it's we must support the teacher, not only about the school, but environment, and also the pattern is the important thing. That's simple for me. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Aris. And I am not seeing any other hands on my screen at the moment. I have seen a lot of good comments made in the chat on the Jamboard, and I'm wondering if there's anyone who would like to share anything related to this third section before we start wrapping up. There is, of course, always the possibility to continue making comments in the chat and on the Jamboard as well. But I think I'm going to thank you for all your inputs and hand back to Carlos.
Thank you very much, Antonia, and thank you to all colleagues for their participation. Indeed, it's been a very rich session in which we've heard changes that are needed in terms of curriculum, of initial teacher training, pedagogies, teaching and learning materials, the professional development needs, changes in learning spaces and environments. And I would just like to thank you all and to join my voice to that of Antonia in thanking you and in welcoming all of your insights, which will be taken into consideration for this consultation. Some of the issues that were mentioned around also the importance, and then Simeo and others, the importance of looking at context and how contexts are changing and what are some of the threats that we're seeing to sustainable development, to social justice, to peaceful societies worldwide. So in that respect, we thank you once again for your input into this consultation. And let me just pass the floor to Cecilia for her final remarks for closing this very fruitful meeting. So back to you, Cecilia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos. And let me also join Carlos and Antonia in thanking really you all for this very interesting conversation, and also to assure you actually that all your comments will really be taken into consideration. You know, we started this dialogue today talking about the recommendation and as a vision, right, of the world that we want, as Carlo mentioned. And of course, education for us is, let's say, the means to achieve this vision of the world that we want. And of course, for us to be able to do that and for really to bring this recommendation to life, we need teachers, we need the educators. I think they are really at the heart, I think, of for this recommendation to become alive. So I think we really appreciate all your efforts to be with us today, and we hope actually to have many more opportunities to, you know, to keep this community also informed on the progress of this work of the recommendation. And of course, once this recommendation will be actually approved in its revised version, that's just the beginning, because of course the idea and the vision that we have, the ambition that we have is of course to have it implemented. So you know, that's where the work of you all will really become absolutely critical. So there will be also opportunities to work together to make sure that we also monitor the progress in this in all your countries. So thank you very much. Now the findings of this consultation will be consolidated in 1 or 2 pages of an outcome document that will be shared with the international expert group in their second meeting in June. As you have heard, the group will meet this week for the first time, and then another time at beginning of June. So all your inputs will be properly compiled, consolidated, and shared with them. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a good continuation of the day wherever you are. Thank you, and thank you to the colleagues from UNESCO and from EI, of course, for helping to put this together. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Teacher Task Force. Bye. This is Winsome
Bye.
from Jamaica.
Bye, Winsome.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Muchas gracias y muchísimo éxito.
Thank you very much, and I wish you the best of success. Thank you. May you all have a nice